You know, there are so many great story arcs in this show, but I only got 5 to talk about. Before we hop into this ranking of the Magi story arcs, please drop your own list in the comment section down below, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? I got the pencil here, and here we are to rank the Magi story arcs, aka my top 5 Magi story arcs, because there are a lot of them in the story, like more than I expected. I didn't realize there were 14, even though I read it like at least twice now, so I'm kind of shocked I didn't notice how many there were, but I only limited myself to a top 5 because if I talk about all of them, not all of it's going to be positive, and 2, there's just too many to talk about. I can't imagine doing a top 14. I could never. No, I'm kidding. I definitely will. I was actually going to do a tier list on this, but I just couldn't find a tier list anywhere, and I was kind of struggling to make my own, so here we are for another top 5. But enough stalling, let's hop right into it with number 5. Y'all know I love my lore, and of course, Almatoran is basically all lore. That's basically the entire backstory of the modern world, so I was super happy to see it. Like, this is what I want in a lot of series. I would love just random flashback arcs to very important times that we just don't get to see a lot in terms of the main narrative, that establish a lot of the main narrative. Almatoran does that for me perfectly. It's great to see everyone. It's great to see Solomon. It's great to see Ugo before he reached godhood. It's great to see Aladdin's mom and Sheba. It's great to see the original Arba. It's great to see all these different characters. Ethnon before he went evil. All these different characters who we know what happens to some of them. We knew Solomon was the god who created the new world. We knew Ugo was Aladdin's jinn. We knew Aladdin had a mom. We also knew that something was weird about the entire situation with Thalman and all of that. We knew so many things, but we didn't have full answers to them. They were kind of like loose connecting dots. Like, we never got the full story about all these different aspects, and Almatoran does that perfectly. I think it goes back to a very important time, the meeting of the last real divine staff wielder that we get, as far as I know. I know there are more divine staff wielders outside of Sheba, but she was the last major one, and obviously she's Aladdin's mom, so she's very important. So us starting around meeting her, and then we flash to the future, and then we get to see her grown up and how everything has changed due to all the hard work of the resistance, and how everything's going great, and how everything seems to be going too great. A little bit too well. A little bit too well to be realistic. And of course, we get these little conflicts that spring up here and there. We see the races still conflicting due to their natural differences. We see all this different mistrust being born by the humans just amongst themselves. And they can't even focus on any of that because they need to focus on the idea of still taking down the church, still taking down David, who's still a massive threat that just happens to exist. It's just they've been weakening him this entire time. So when they finally go and take on David and he's taken out so quickly, it's a shock to the system, only for the plot twist to be revealed and that they were trapped in there, and then everybody dies, basically. The entire resistance, their whole families, everything dies. Fallen's child dies, little Tess dies, everyone basically falls away. Some people's brother die. People suffer because of a mistake that they made because they underestimated David. They thought they had done the most, but they hadn't done enough. And all that suffering is what leads to Solomon being made king, and the story of a man who never wanted to become king being forced to become king in order to restore some sense of order. It's a great story. It's great seeing Solomon go through something like this because he's simultaneously the strongest magician, so you would think he'd be taking up more of a Magi type role, but he's at the same time he needs to be king because of how much power he has. He's a warrior king, and the fact that he didn't want to be it's great. And I honestly am going to talk about Solomon more in depth, but he's one of my favorite parts of that arc. However, the thing that makes me like the arc even more is that we get reasoning for the formation of Althalma. We get reasoning for everyone's fall in the darkness. We get reasoning for why Arba hates the new world so much and hates Solomon so much. The fact that she just sat there and witnessed as the person she cared about for years and years just went and murdered their creator. Because, hey, he wasn't doing much good on his own, so Solomon decided to say, you know what if I just, boom, and then took care of it. All of these dark motivations get set up, they get established super well. We get to see everything. We get to see the creation of the new world. We get to see Ugo's ascension to Jinn, then godhood. We get to see all of this great stuff. However, the only thing that holds it back from being any higher on the list is the idea that all these characters, despite them, some of them being established in the main narrative, they all kind of come out of left field. They come out of nowhere. And since we're in an old world, we're in a flashback, my subconscious mind, who had read flashbacks before, knew that if I didn't hear this character's name before, they were going to die. And considering that this was apparently many, many years in the past, they're probably dead. So I was preemptively this is just an issue for me, so I can understand this isn't an issue for anyone else. I was preemptively expecting people to die, so I was forcefully like holding back my connections to certain people because I'm like, I like your character design, I like the way your character acts, but you're probably dead. And honestly, I was bamboozled. Some of them are still alive in Ilala, and of course you have the members of Althalman. But in short, I knew everything was going to go bad, and while seeing it go bad was fantastic, that's my one issue. And the other issue is that since this is one arc, with all these different characters that need to be introduced, given personalities, given designs, given backstories, it has to be a little bit rushed. And since it's a little bit rushed, I'm not as connected to these characters as I am to other characters in these other arcs, where I have more time with them, where they all get their own individual introductions and backstories and time dedicated to that. So the only weaknesses of the Almatoran arc, at least in my mind, are the ideas that sometimes there were too many characters that were likely going to die, and also it was just so quick. Like, not necessarily a quick arc, it's one of the longer ones, but it was so quick in the fact that it had so much to establish, so much to get through, that it just didn't have enough time in of itself. Like, instead of a Sinbad no Boken manga, I'm not gonna lie, I would very much prefer an Almatoran manga following Solomon, but that's just me. That's it. Let's not talk about the Almatoran arc anymore. It's a fantastic arc regardless, but let's move on to number 4. So I did bully the final arc just a bit in my video on Friday. I did talk about how it has problems and how I'd fix them. But regardless of that, due to the final arc taking up so much time and space, and due to it having so much great character stuff that I like, from character power-ups to character interactions to character growth, all this good stuff, the final arc is what makes Kogyoki one of my favorite characters. The final arc is what makes Alibaba a more interesting character for me. The final arc is what justifies Sinbad for me, honestly. As much as I don't like what he did, becoming the final villain and all the stuff like that, or pseudo final villain or whatever you want to call him, final antagonist, only to not be. All of this stuff, regardless of the problems I have with it, I find super interesting. The entire back half of the narrative where we just ascend into higher dimensions and start learning about the fabric of the Magi multiverse. Amazing. I love learning more about the way the new world changed. As much as I wish we got a more progressive growth of the new world, it's cool to see all the 8 generals go back to their respective homes. It's cool to see all the 8 generals having their mixed feelings about giving up Syndria, something they worked so hard on, going through all this suffering only for it to suddenly change. Like, all this stuff is great character-wise. All of the suffering of the Ko-Empire after it was in such a magnificent state beforehand, all of the sudden change, even though I don't like him when he becomes true antagonist, I think Sinbad being this ruthless monster is one of the things I did like about him from Rip. So seeing him try to tear away the Ko-Empire in whatever way he could, I like it. All of this stuff is very, very interesting. The only main problems I have with it is just really, I guess you could call them nitpicks, but I think these are major issues. The sudden shift to this higher dimensionality stuff, all of a sudden changes that happen due to the fact of Sinbad going nuts, and then not necessarily going nuts, but going crazy, and then not going crazy, he just changes a lot in terms of, oh, I need to rule the world, and he suddenly can't see anything wrong with him being the only person ruling the world, even though that's what he hated in the past, all this different stuff. And I love Aladdin's power-up. I love Aladdin end of series basically entirely. As much as I don't like the fact that their power-ups get wasted, I like Morgiana and Hakuryu's end series design. I like Alibaba's ability, even though it's not used that well. I like so many things about the final arc. I just have problems with it. And the reason the final arc edged above the Almatoran arc just barely, because I'll admit the Almatoran arc was initially above it, is because of how much good it does for already established characters. We don't have to worry about backstory at this point. We don't have to worry about anything like that. We just have to worry about how these characters are going to conclude. And considering I like pretty much every single character conclusion, including Morgiana, Alibaba, Aladdin, the only character conclusion I don't like is Sinbad's, because I think he got a free get out of jail free card. That's the only thing I don't like. But the rest of the character conclusions I like. A lot of the fights I like. Arba's conclusion I like. I like all this stuff. There are just issues I have with it, and that's what keeps it from higher, because a lot of these, I'd say these top 3 arcs are like, man, I could try and take a scalpel and I could probably find issues if I glared hard enough. But these top 3 arcs, they don't have glaring issues to me, or like issues that I can clearly say, I don't like this, I don't like that. These arcs that are above this arc, just super solid writing. Amazingly solid writing with great character moments, all of that. And with basically no issues that I find major enough to degrade the arcs for. But for the final arc, I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great way to end the series. I wish we hadn't leapt so far, but that's the only issue I have. If we hadn't leapt so far into the future, if characters weren't explicitly left out of the final battle with Sinbad, even though he had 7 Jins, you could have fit a couple more characters in there. I understand the ending had to be rushed, but the final arc does good. Character-wise, fight-wise, design-wise, art-wise. I think despite some art being reused in the final arc, once again due to the ending of Magi being extremely rushed, the art was the peak of Otaka Sensei. Like, Otaka Sensei just popped off in the final arc in terms of their designs and everything they were able to do with their art and their characters, the dynamic flowing of the battles. All of that was fantastic. I think they did great work. I think the art was good. I think the story was pretty good. I think the character conclusions were great, except for Sinbad's. Fantastic art. But it is only number 4. Let's move on to number 3. I think this next rereading of Magi has made me want to shift my entire character list. I think Hakuryu has risen. My man has risen to be the number 2 because he still falls below Aladdin. But basically, the Koa Empire arc is definitely one of my favorite arcs in Magi. Why? Because we follow this man becoming a absolute pure indirect monster throughout the entirety of these 40 chapters. Chapter 242 to 282, chef's kiss fire. Perfect. Want to know why? Because we get to see what Hokuriku has fallen to. My man runs up with Judar. He shakes the hand of the Dark Magician and decides that, you know what? I don't care anymore. I don't care what I need to do to acquire the power to take out Gyoken and to take back my empire and to do everything to avenge my family, to avenge my fallen brothers. I'll do anything. And the will, the drive, the determination to do what he views as right is amazing. And honestly, usually I would praise that in a character. I love when a character has determination. But as Judar repeatedly points out throughout the arc, Hakuriku's sense of justice and his determination has become so heavily twisted due to constant years of nothing but internalized hatred that he refuses to share with anyone else, that he must carry on his back alone in his mind. All of that has done nothing but damage Hokuriku and slowly degraded this really highly moral man, this seemingly perfect guy on the outside, into just a crippled, nasty being on the inside. And you can see that. The way he goes to conquer Belial, he doesn't conquer it by passing Belial's trial in the normal way and, realizing the internal lies he's been telling himself are just that, they're lies, and that he needs to change his ways and he needs to learn to accept other people to help him other than the Dark Magician he decided to align with, and he needs to become a true proper king's vessel. He looks at all these people that he hasn't talked to, that he ignored, that he didn't care about anymore, and he destroys them. He cuts them down. They're irrelevant to him now at this point. He just cares about what he can do for himself to get his idea of justice. So when he slays Hakue, and it's like, yes, you've done nothing. Of course, you would never do anything to help me because you don't care. You're wrong. And when he slays Morgiana and says she's going to slay everyone because they were wrong. They have to be wrong because what he's doing is right. And you see him fall to torturing his own men. You see him take them over by force. He takes Belial by force. He takes everything by force. And then he goes and he fights and he slays Gyoken. And you can just see he's going and going and going for no reason. Afterwards, Judar just calls him out. Yeah. Hakuryu, you definitely just lost all sanity. While Judar had fallen to depravity sort of out of his own will, despite him being forced to fall into depravity by Althalman, he was very much living for his own desires, except his desires actually were destruction. But seeing Hakuryu fall to this sense of despair and falling to depravity, all for the wrong reasons. This was not Hakuryu falling of his own free will. But it was. It's a weird way that the Koa Empire arc just shows that Hakuryu, due to all of his self-internalization of his hatred, makes him a monster. It makes him so wrong, and he has such perverse ideals of his beliefs at this point that they're not even beliefs anymore. When he finally kills Gyoken, that final motivation that he finally has, he finally completed it, he just runs out. He's been running on hatred for all these years. He has no idea what to do with himself now. He's empty when he should focus on running his empire, maybe realigning with Cohen, trying to apologize for all the things he's done, letting his soldiers go free. They've completed what he needed to complete it for all these years. He's avenged his brothers. He's done everything he needed to do. He doesn't stop. He looks at Cohen as like, Cohen's a usurper. Cohen's a usurper. Honestly, despite forcing all these lies into his soldiers' heads and forcing them to fight against their will, he's being forced to fight against his own will by the own lies he's told himself. He's the one lying to himself the most when Koen needs to die. When he's forcing himself to do all this extra unnecessary stuff, he's doing it all to himself. And this character journey of Hakuryu is honestly fantastic, and I can't believe I downplayed it so much in my ranking the main characters. He's easy number 2 now that I think about it. But the thing about that is, seeing all of that, it's beautiful. And I love seeing that in the end, he submits to Sinbad. Because he has to. Because he realized he's not the all-powerful king he once wanted to be. He can't kill the world and recreate it as he wanted to with Judar. He's just not that powerful. He's not that good. He's not that amazing. So he has to submit to a person he made a promise to many, many chapters ago. And you can see how he hates himself for it. I think the Cold Empire arc does a fantastic job of showing us not only Hakuryu's journey, but how all the other characters respond to it. Of course, the final civil war part of this arc, where we see Kogyoku and Koha go up against the entire army with Kome, and they're sparing their soldiers. They're really being the good people. And these people were, well, all of these people at one point, except for maybe Koha. I think Koha was always like a neutral party. But every single one, from Kogyoku to Kome to Koen, all these people were enemies at one point. But compared to the person we had followed, our main character, Hakuryu, up to this point, they're all good guys now. They're just trying to save their own nation from self-destruction and trying to prevent the deaths of their own people. Seeing Hakuryu be a monster, become the villain, and seeing our main villains become the heroes, it's such a great flip. I love this arc. I have no problems with it. That's the thing. I have no problems with it. While I do think Hakuryu's flip afterwards, back to normal, does happen a little bit too quickly, but I can understand why it happens, because honestly, seeing Koen in the weakened state is like a wake-up call. Hearing Koen's truth is a wake-up call. Honestly, it makes sense. So that's even the one problem I have, it's not really a problem. So I think the Cold Empire arc, fantastic. I definitely need to do an analysis on this arc as its own video. I definitely want to break it down more. So yeah, it's a wonderful arc. Let's move on to number 2. The Balbad arc is Bal Great. Okay, no, I'm gonna stop. But basically, I love the Balbad arc. Mainly because despite it still being in like the beginning phases of Magi, it introduces so many great characters, from Judar to Kogyoku to Sinbad himself. It introduces a whole ton of characters, especially in contexts that we will not get used to seeing them in. Like, Judar is the only character we get that stays loyal to his sort of introduction. Like, he's still a menace throughout a majority of the series, if not the entire rest of the series. Even when he becomes a good guy in the end, he's still a menace. But Kogyoku changes into a fantastic character. But when you get introduced to Kogyoku in this arc, she's a menace. She's the definition of a menace. She's ready to kill all these people for no real reason. And I think that's great. I love seeing Alibaba, a character who we had trusted and grown to know as, oh, he's one of our protagonists. He can't do any wrong. He's a nice guy. And then we get to see him leading the Fog Troop, rebelling against his own nation. I think Kasim, he's one of the best villains in the entire series, mainly because he's so human and relatable. Like, you can understand every single one of Kasim's motivations, from why he wants to be king, from why he's jealous of Alibaba, to why he's so uncertain of himself, why he used Alibaba in the way he did. Everything of Kasim makes perfect sense. And also, he is just one of, in my opinion, this may just be me, he has one of the swaggiest designs in all of Magi. Like, the dreads, the constant cigar, like, I just think he's cool. Like, I have nothing else to say other than that. He has a cool design. I love it when he falls to a black djinn and Alibaba has to go in and save him. And then one of their final moments is like, yeah, of course we're still friends, buddy. Like, all that cool stuff. I think it's great. I think Sinbad is honestly, ironically enough, when he's at his least powerful, he's at his best, because he's allowed to use a lot of his other side abilities. Because really in Magi, Sinbad doesn't fight too often. He sort of just shows up on occasion and does something big and cool and he leaves for a while, until the final arc when he becomes a god. So that's the thing. We don't necessarily get much of Sinbad. So when he's in this weakened state and he's sort of like remembering that without his mental vessels, he's still a regular human person, I like seeing him like this. I think this is like one of the most raw states for all of our characters. Because really, all of our characters, especially our main ones, our 3 main ones that we have at this point, are in baby mode. Like, Morgiana's fodder. Alibaba's fodder. Even Aladdin, our resident Magi, is fodder. All these different characters that we've gotten to know are all fodder. And it's great to see that. Like, they keep running into these threats that are sort of way beyond their comprehension up to this point. Like, the entire introduction of the Black Djinns, the first major threat of Althalman, the introduction of the Ko-Empire through Judar and Kogyoku. Like, this arc does so much good for the characters in it. It does great for Alibaba. It's why, man, maybe sometimes he will fight Hakuryu for that top spot, but I like my characters to suffer. So I think Hakuryu has to take Hakuryu. I keep saying his name is Hakuriku. Whatever. But the thing is, I love how much character stuff Alibaba goes through, learning Alibaba's entire backstory in this arc, seeing Morgiana's dedication to both him and Aladdin and to protecting people, seeing Aladdin's new understanding of his role as a Magi within the world. All this arc, it's just great. It's beautiful. It's wonderful stuff. I love it all. And I, once again, can find no problems with it. The only thing that holds us back from being number one is that I like some villains more, and I like some stories more, and I like some moments more in other arcs. I know that's wild, but that's about it. Because otherwise, I can't really find a major problem with this arc. Like I said, for these top 3 arcs, please drop problems. Drop problems in the comment section down below. And leave a like if you don't mind. But drop problems in the comment section down below, because this is me like, these top 3 arcs are like arcs where I struggle to find issues with. And you know me at this point. If you've been around on the channel for a while, you know that if there's one thing I can do, even in things I like, it's find problems. But I struggle because I think these arcs are just so fantastic. But the Battle Battle arc isn't as fantastic as to be number 1. But let's get into number 1. It blows my mind how well written this arc is, how well paced, how well the characters are written, how well everything's done. The Magastar arc is so unbelievably well written that I say it stands up there with Full Metal Alchemist. I say it stands up there with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I say it stands up there with all the well written things out there. It's so, everything in this arc's fantastic. Like, I literally can't find a problem. So it's weird to think that this arc is only like 50 chapters long. I know 50 chapters long sounds long, and it is. It's not even, I think it's like 49. But regardless of that, I think this arc is spaced out so beautifully, because you get the introduction, you get Aladdin going to Magastar, you get him learning all the magics, you get him meeting Titus, you get him meeting the roommate. I don't know. That's the whole thing. Okay, there's one issue. There's one issue in the arc. I think it's the roommate. No, I'm kidding. I think Carmen's great. I just don't know how to say his first name. That's why I struggle so much. But I think every single character has great moments within these arcs. I think the entire situation with Titus versus Aladdin, only realizing they're 2 different situations, that Titus is a clone, and while Aladdin is an actual Magi, but he's a Magi from a different world, so he doesn't really count, just like Titus is a temporary living being, so he doesn't really count. Then you learn the entire situation about how, despite how great Magastar seems, you learn about the 5th district, how much people are suffering down there, and how they don't seem to care, and how the top people, Matal, doesn't even seem to care. Then you have the discussion and debate between Matal and Aladdin. You have all these great discussions in this arc. You have all these moments where characters are conflicting with themselves and each other, and you keep seeing what Matal is doing, and you get to, and the weird thing is, you start to understand his logic, like, especially once you learn his backstory. Like, at first his logic just makes sense, because you can see the Goy are happy, aren't they? What's the problem? And guess what? You remove that one girl, what about the rest of them? What about the ones you didn't meet? What about all the people who suffer regardless? Like, Matal challenges our main characters in such interesting ways. Everyone goes through such wild arcs of both growth in magic and also growth in understanding of themselves and all the different levels of suffering. Then you have the entire eternal crisis that Titus is having throughout the arc, considering he knows he's going to die soon. Then you have the entire back half of the arc where Matal finally just gives up and gives in. Actually, no, not even. Let's not even get to that. Then we have the entire Rem versus War. The Rem versus Magastar war, and you see the different effects of the different levels of people, how the traditional army fares up against the magicians, then how the Fanilas just prove that they're my favorite race when they come in as a couple people in a court and just absolutely destroy the entire magician. Then you see Aladdin's awakening into the sand giants, how he blasts people away when he finally allows himself to use his true magic. All this amazing stuff. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. The war itself is fantastic. All the build up to the war is fantastic. Matal is a perfect villain. You get all these different wonderful characters, from Titus to Carmen to Aladdin's own character growth through his understanding and development of his own moral compass throughout the entire arc. Then you get the Ko-Empire flexes in this entire arc. I'm not even gonna lie. When Koha shows up and you get his entire backstory and you get to see him going up against the Black Djinn summoned by Matal and this entire war that's taking place, and then you see how chaotic it gets when Cohen shows up and he's like, hey, Well, sucks to suck, but I guess everyone's coming in. It's that time, boys and girls, and everyone shows up, and you get this massive war against the medium in the black spot, and then everyone else comes in. Morgiana drops in, Alibaba drops in, all these characters, the Jinn show up. It's just so much happens. Like, so much happens in this 49 chapter span, and I love all of it. The near rebirth of Ilallah, the reveals, the build up to the Almatoran arc, all this beautiful stuff. I think the arc's perfect. Like, hands down. I'm definitely gonna have to clearly write out a script and more properly talk about this arc, because if I go just on the complete rambling form, there's so many things I want to talk about, from Aladdin growing so much as a character, just Titus's acceptance of his own death and his willingness to go save Matal after all the wrong things Matal has done, even the people he cared about like Marga, all the willingness of all these magicians to lay down their lives for the country they built for, all the different awakenings, all the suffering of these different characters. This arc is beautiful. Otaka Sensei, I don't know. You just struck gold. Like, you caught lightning in a bottle and just held it there. Like, you didn't even buy. Like, I know as you drew this, the pages were burning because this is too fire. This is too heat. But that's me. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? What is your favorite arc in the entire Magi manga? What's your top 5 in my mind? Like, what are your top 5 arcs? Please tell me in the comment section down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.